very much. So welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. One of the partners in this forum is the Mon Magazine Award Foundation, who are celebrating their 60th anniversary. And if you think back to when they began, then roughly 1/3 of the world's population lived in cities. By the middle of this century, on some estimations, that will be 2/3 of a much larger global population will be living in cities. I was born in 1955. Then there were 2 mega cities in the whole world, cities of more than 10 million people. Today there are at least 37 mega cities and rising. So the whole question about how we create smart, livable cities is a critical part of reimagining the future. Businesses, of course, it means that many more of their employees are going to be located in urban areas. Many more of their customers and their business partners and suppliers are going to be located in those urban areas. And so what responsibilities do businesses have for playing their part with city authorities, with civil society, with central governments in building smart, sustainable cities of the 21st century? To help us debate this question this afternoon, I'm very sad to say
that AI or IA,
who was meant to be part of this afternoon's panel, has been unavoidably detained elsewhere because he's been called to the magical presidential palace for a meeting with the president. And I'm told that you don't refuse an invitation to go and have a meeting with the president. But we're delighted at very short notice. One of Jaime's key colleagues in their Ayala group of companies, Dr. Arturo, who is the Chief Urban Planner and Director of Ayala Land, is going to be speaking in his place. And welcome, thank you very much for coming at incredibly short notice. Amongst many other claims to fame, he's a former president of the Philippines Economics Society. He got his PhD from Cornell, and he tells me that he relaxes by going and motorbiking most weekends. So if you get behind him sometime, you'll have to see how fast he can go. Ayesha, of course, we heard from in our earlier session this afternoon. And then our third and final panelist, by no means least, is Dr. Christopher Monterola, who tells me that when he retires, he wants to be a basketball coach, I'm so sorry, a basketball coach, and he's hoping that AI or IA is going to help him to do that, but meantime, he's been helping to actually create the infrastructure for smart cities. So that's our panel, ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon. We're going to have some introductory comments and reflections from each of our 3 panelists, beginning with Art, and then we will involve you in the conversation about what is it going to take to create smart, sustainable, inclusive 21st century cities. Art, the floor is yours.
Okay, good afternoon, David. So I think I'll start by, as we have discussed, talk a little bit about what we think a 21st century city is all about. So there are many perspectives from which we can imagine a city, but let me share with you the perspective of a developing country where many of the large cities of the world are located, like Metro Manila. And let me do that by talking about 3 dimensions that I think cover a lot of what it's all about. The first is perhaps the most basic, that it's a city that essentially works, to put it bluntly. That means it's productive, efficient, innovative, it has the infrastructure for functioning reasonably well. But I think for cities like Metro Manila, for example, it also includes basic things that we tend to take for granted when we are in other cities, but which we cannot when we are here or in similar urban environments. Like things like very basic, like public toilets that are clean or that work, or reliable public transportation that is available, or regulatory processes that do not require bribes. For those of us who grew up in Metro Manila, you would be familiar with the idea of follow-up. Every time you apply with an agency for a permit or a license, you need to follow up. It's like follow-up has been an acceptable part of day-to-day life. That in some of the offices, you see signs that say, for follow-ups, please call blank blank or please see blank blank blank. So, of course, if things work reasonably well, there would be no need to follow up. So, it's also a venue for additional naughty things to take place. But the other part of a city that works is that it is again very basic, safe. But moving forward, I think it's where entrepreneurship and technology collide constantly, so that it drives competition, so that leading firms can thrive and compete globally. The second dimension, I think, is also fairly fundamental, and that is a city that is, you might call inclusive. So where it's reasonably equitable, democratic, where most opportunities are open to citizens, where basic education and healthcare and housing are not luxuries, and ideally where trickle down is not really needed. But realistically, I think we can say that it's where social differentiation obviously still takes place, but very few are left behind when it comes to the basic stuff. And then the third and final dimension I see for a 21st century city is that, I wanted to describe it as one that is environmentally sustainable, but those terms are really, sound very tired already. So I'm going to borrow a phrase that was attributed to Mayor Peñalosa of Bogota, when he said that for him, the ideal city, and I'm paraphrasing, the ideal city is where you always want to be outside. Because the air is not polluted, because lakes and rivers are relatively clean, and maybe the esteros, the canal system here, can actually support normal aquatic life. Or it's also where parks and other socially inclusive spaces are ubiquitous parts of our everyday life, where flooding and other disasters are reasonably mitigated. And I think the more important concept is where the integrity of our natural systems, ecosystems, is an integral part of our business objectives, our business model, so that in a market or a capitalist system, this, I think, goes a long way towards making sustainability itself sustainable. So, those are three dimensions that I could see how this could, how we can imagine 21st century city, and maybe we can discuss a little bit of that later.
Absolutely. And I think it's very interesting within that very interesting list was the question about places where you can be outside a lot of the time. But that, of course, presumes that you haven't got extreme climate conditions, which makes it either very hot or very cold to do so. I think it's fascinating that some places innovative work on climate change is actually happening amongst the C40 group of cities who are really, in many cases, going beyond what national governments are doing. So we'll come back to that in a moment, but Ayesha, you've obviously been involved in Dubai and Singapore and so on, and been thinking a lot about what makes sustainable cities. So what's on your list?
Right, so I'm going to come at it from a kind of technical point of view because the meme of smart cities has been around for a long time. It was that there were saviors, these kind of big companies like IBM that would come in and they would create operating cities for the companies and for the cities. And that has largely and thankfully been completely debunked now. The new Smart City 2.0, as I call it, is an ecosystem of partners and platforms, public-private partnerships that create more democratized access to infrastructure. So one of the things that we did in Singapore was we said that transportation needed to be better so that people could figure out the last mile problem. Now most people buy a car because they want the certainty that they'll be able to get to their end location. If I take an MRT or a subway or a bus, I still have to walk that last mile. And it's hot or the traffic is a lot, I can't hail a taxi. So we developed from them a platform, one app, which would map your entire journey from beginning to end, and it would integrate all possible forms of transportation. So it would say you can start with a bus service and we booked and reserved your seat, and then you reserve your bike share, you can hop on it, unlock it with a QR code, and go and put it at the office. And what happens in such a case is that by using public transportation, traditional players, and private companies, such as China's Mobike, for instance, or even autonomous vehicles, you have now created a public and private transportation infrastructure that is more optimized, more efficient, and sustainable. And the reason it's sustainable is because people have the certainty of reaching their destination on time, they are less likely to actually own a car. Now, in everything that I've said, I've mostly talked about technology. And this is the problem, perhaps. A long time ago, I went to this new city in Korea, and it was beautiful, and they built it from scratch, and it had CCTV cameras everywhere, and all the apartments had Cisco telepresence. And then I said, you keep talking about technology, but what about the 3 Ps? People, privacy, poverty. And so now I'm pleased to see that when we talk about cities, and smart cities in particular, we have to take into account people. And the Facebook fiasco has shown us that data is not only created by social media giants that take our data, but in smart cities where there are sensors and video cameras everywhere. Where is that data going? Who owns it? Where are they selling it? We should know this as citizens. And finally, who's talking about the poor people? I remember asking them, I said, these apartments are so expensive. Who are these waiters in these restaurants? Where do they live? And they said, oh, well, they live far away. We have a bus service that brings them in. And it seemed to me that that was a terribly stupid city, not a smart city at all, because it was doing what we're used to, which was perpetuating the inequity in a city. And so finally, given that a smart city is one that is much more not only about technology infrastructure, but about its people and equity amongst them, is the concept of the smart nation, which is what Singapore calls itself now. And I like that, because Singapore by far is acknowledged as the world's smartest city in terms of its network of infrastructure and efficiency of the government. But they decided that they wanted to have not only a smart city in technology, but a nation that had a smart economy in which people had smart skills. And even the elderly were taken care of. So they're developing new sustainable districts, which are car light, and at the same time, they're mixed communities. So that the elderly, when they come out, they have smart homes inside, so that if they fall, the doctor is notified via sensor. But when they walk out, there are kindergartens and malls. Because people don't only die of old age accidents, they die of loneliness. And if we don't have human-centered cities where we empathize with all ages, then we are falling far short of a livable smart city. And so I hope we'll see much more of that, and I'm excited about the debate to learn more about what's happening here.
Fantastic, thank you. So,